To begin our story, let's jump all the way back to the beginning with the conception of physical goods. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. The first major introduction of what we refer to as physical media began in the late 1940s with the invention of the long play, otherwise known as records or vinyls by the common folk of today. These, as many of us know, were used to play music in everyday households at a time when the idea of this was becoming increasingly more popular. There were attempts to bring these to market in years before then, but they usually flopped due to the sparsity of in-home music playing devices, as well as the relatively high price of this type of medium, and in combination with all of this taking place during the Great Depression, yeah, it's no wonder these didn't sell at the time. However, in 1948, a Sony-owned record label named Columbia Records came waltzing in and said, "We're going to introduce what will become the standard way to purchase and play music for the next 20 years, those cocky bastards." And thus the LP became exactly that, and ushered in what is known today as the album era. A time when companies kept selling them and consumers kept buying them. Popular bands all across the world were making most of their money via sales of their music printed onto these records, and allowed for many of them to play around with the idea of concept albums, collections of songs that had shared themes and told stories through the magic of playing these things. It was a great time to buy music, and a bad time to make this bet. Yes, in 1963, humanity saw the release of the compact cassette tape, offering a new alternative method of in-home music playing. Developed by Philips, who at the time specialized in consumer electronics, the main appeal of cassettes was their portability, giving them an edge against vinyl records, considering, yes, bring this on a walk, I dare you. With the introduction of the Walkman in 1979 and gadgets like the boombox, these little guys exploded in popularity, which gave LPs a good bit of competition. However, there were a few drawbacks to cassettes. For one, they were smaller in size, which made it easier for shoplifters to... which did mean a lot of sellers lost out on a good amount of potential sales. And two, they just didn't offer as high of audio quality as vinyl records did. Sure, you could take them with you on the go, but is that really worth much when they sound like this? Okay, yes, I am exaggerating here. Cassettes were more than capable of producing adequate audio quality, and as time went on, they only continued to improve in this department, and by 1985, they finally overtook records as the primary method of musical playback. But that's just talking the purely audio-related media of the time. What about the video side of things? Well, at the time, this world was experiencing a similar story, with the first major success in the home video market also being in a cassette format. There had been an interest in bringing widespread methods of playing visual media to the public for quite some time, going back as far as the use of film projectors, but those were never really affordable for many people, and I don't have any more kidneys to sell, so cassettes will have to do. And thus, in 1976, humanity was graced with the release of the Video Home System, or VHS tape. These were invented by the Victor Company of Japan, or JVC, and were super popular during this era. Any middle to upper class family that lived through the 80s is no stranger to these things. They were everywhere, being the primary way to watch both old and new movies and shows throughout the time period. And as the decade progressed, video cassette recorders, or VCRs, were no doubt a worthy investment, as at the time, VHS tapes were constantly releasing and were quite an affordable form of at-home entertainment. This stick has served me well, but it's time to move on. VHS tapes were heavily marketed during the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, and they sold quite well. Which is why, even though they're not sold brand new in retail stores today, you can still find quite a number of them in antique stores and stores that specialize in retro media. I have so much nostalgia for these, man. These were some of the first ways that I watched what I remember as my favorite childhood shows and movies. I would watch Pokemon the first movie and random Thomas the Tank Engine episodes on VHS, the latter being why I have all of this shit. That's right, I was a big Thomas the Tank Engine back in the day. You can tell since I sold one of my kidneys for this train.
And it was worth it.
VHS tapes were at the top of their game during this era, but this wasn't always the case for the home video scene, as just 1 year before the first public sales of VHS, we would first see the release of the Betamax.
Who?
Another Sony patented endeavor, the Betamax was an alternative form of playing video-based media from the comfort of your home, and did offer a significantly higher video and audio quality when compared to VHS. Released in 1975, Betamax did hold 100% of the market on home video media for a bit there. But in the end, VHS tapes came out on top. And why is this the case? Well, a commonality between both of these formats was that not only could consumers use them to watch preloaded videos, but also record their own via their respective playing devices. And while Betamax offered better overall quality, VHS tapes offered larger amounts of recording space, allowing for a greater range of media to be sold and recorded on them. This proved to be a far more important factor in determining which between the two formats became the bigger commercial success, and thus the VHS market continued to thrive. Meanwhile, if you ask me to show you my Betamax collection, yeah, you know, some say VHS tapes won the war of the two videotape formats due to their larger abundance of pornographic movies being available on them.
I can watch Thomas and the Magic Railroad on this one.
And so, cassettes became the foundation of the home media market, with both music and video being sold primarily via this medium. But there was another form of entertainment that was slowly starting to garner attention from the general public during this time period.
I wonder what that could be.
It was around the time of the 1970s that video games, and video game consoles, began a steep rise in mainstream popularity. And yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you want to let one of these into your house? Oh. Well, people sure did love buying them in the 70s and 80s, and barring the video game crash of 1983, video game cartridges and their corresponding cartridge-based consoles became the main source of profit within the craze. Yes, basically all video games were manufactured and sold via cartridges during this time, with the video game's ROM, or read-only memory, being loaded onto them. Beforehand, video games were either played with the games preloaded onto the video game consoles themselves, or they were just played via arcade machines, but cartridge-based systems allowed for so much more variety on what you could play from the comfort of your own home. Trash and garbage. These were the standard for quite a while, but they were fairly pricey. So between video games, music cassettes, and VHS tapes, video games were the most often coveted as a luxury, something only the more well-endowed folks out there could get their hands on. But the companies that sold physical media knew that this was not the extent of what the future held for them, and moving into the latter half of the 1970s, they continued to dream of a new form factor for their products, one that would not only be cheaper to produce, but one that would expand the world of possibilities of what could be stored on them, both in terms of quality and runtime. And then, in 1978, we got half of that. 1978 saw the introduction of the Laserdisc. Yeah, look familiar?
Oh shit, it's a circle.
Laserdiscs were another format of home video, developed and manufactured by Philips, who you may remember also developed the first cassette tapes. And while VHS was an acceptable standard for the time, Laserdiscs offered a significantly higher video and audio quality. Laserdiscs were a revolutionary invention for the time, and garnered a good amount of sales moving into the 80s and early 90s. But they never reached the same level of mainstream popularity as VHS tapes, at least in most countries. Despite offering better quality, Laserdiscs didn't allow for users to record and store their own media, unlike VHS tapes. At the time, it was quite common for consumers to tape their favorite TV shows for later consumption, since watching media on demand wasn't a thing. And Laserdiscs just didn't allow for that. This, combined with the higher production cost of the Laserdiscs themselves and the relatively high cost of Laserdisc players, meant this technology would unfortunately never be able to stand toe-to-toe with the competition. Plus, I mean, look at these things. They're so big, they take up way too much space.
We need to find a way to make Laserdiscs more compact. Oh!
During the late 1970s, Sony and Philips banded together to develop the compact disc, or CD, which was released to the public in 1982 in Japan and the rest of the world in 1983. Now, these were a game changer. CDs were designed to house purely audio-based media, and were heavily influenced by and built off of the Laserdiscs that came before them, but with basically everything improved. These were smaller, as the name implies, they had more storage capacity, and outputted better audio quality compared to the competition, and combined with all of that, they were cheaper for companies to produce. After their initial launch in the early 1980s, CDs sold like crazy, and by 1992, they had surpassed both vinyl records and compact cassette tapes as the premier method for consuming audio-based media. I'd say the main drawback to CDs was their inherent frailty. I mean, come on, you take one swing of a hammer at these things, they're toast. Like, what the f***? And yes, the technology was still expensive, especially for the time. But none of that mattered. The demand for CDs was high and they still sold phenomenally well, and because of this, eventually became more and more affordable for consumers over time. And given this sudden and drastic shift in how music was consumed by the public, it was only natural that manufacturers of both VHS tapes and video game cartridges would start to shift their business ventures down a similar path. You see, late into the 1980s, companies would once again be experimenting with video output via disc-based formats, leading to the inventions of the CD-ROM and video CDs. CD-ROMs were mainly used in computers and later for video game consoles during the 5th generation, which included the Sega Saturn and Sony's PlayStation, while video CDs were used by... Yeah, these were never super popular, but they did hammer home the desire for this type of technology, just like me. And finally, in 1996, it happened.
Oh, we also got DVDs.
Yes, we finally made it here. In 1996, companies all across the world began releasing their media on digital video discs, or digital versatile discs, or just simply DVDs. These were to VHS tapes as CDs were to cassettes, and all of the benefits of CDs apply. DVDs were cheaper to produce, had far better storage capacity, and were more compact, measuring the same dimensions as CDs. And if CDs made a splash in the home entertainment industry, then DVDs just drained the whole damn pool. These quickly became the standard for not just home video, but video game consoles as well. DVDs were such a revelation. If you ever saw a VHS tape growing up, I guarantee you saw, if not owned, 4 times as many DVDs. They were so damn popular. And before you ask, yes, I am a f***ing dork.
But why would you need to ask that?
And just like that, disc-based media held dominance on the market. VHS tapes, cassettes, game cartridges, even laserdiscs, they were all still around, but they just couldn't live up to the mass appeal that CDs and DVDs had. Eventually, Sony would go on to develop the Blu-ray disc, which was released to the public in 2006. These held the same form factor as the CDs and DVDs before them, but were able to output video in a far better resolution. This was life now. Circles were in. They were the new hot fad. Everybody had to get them. But you know what's better than a circle? Nothing. Despite discs being a standard for media consumption, there was always that little voice in everyone's head that pondered the question, what if you could watch and consume content whenever you wanted without needing physical goods? And if that wasn't in everyone's head, it was at the very least in mine.
What do you mean I have schizophrenia?
Well, the answer to this quandary would eventually be found, as moving into the late 90s and early 2000s, the advent of the internet was becoming more and more prominent in everyone's lives. And many businesses were taking notice, including a little company by the name of Netflix. You know Netflix, everyone knows Netflix. They're like that guy that always shows up to high school reunions that everyone talks to but no one actually likes. Well, see, at the time of their inception in 1997, Netflix was initially founded as a DVD rental service. At first, they offered rentals by each DVD, but they eventually began offering a subscription service that allowed consumers to rent as many DVDs as they wanted for a small fee each month. These types of businesses were very common during this time period. Stores like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and services such as Redbox were definitely quite popular, and for a good reason. The idea of being able to rent a movie through a DVD or VHS in a similar way you would check out a book from the library just for a small fee, it wasn't just novel, but ideal for many people, especially those that didn't necessarily want to hold on to the movie they were purchasing. I think it was around this time that many people started to realize that while buying DVDs was fun and could be quite convenient, they also tended to take up more space than they wanted. You see, all these different forms of physical media were kept in boxes. I mean, naturally, you had to store them somehow. But boxes, fun little fact, take up a good amount of space, especially when you have quite a few of them.
Have I made that point clearly enough yet?
So yeah, renting movies was an ideal solution to this problem, which is why these video rental services thrived for quite a while there, including Netflix. However, in 2005, a little website by the name of YouTube launched, and that definitely turned a couple heads. Not always for the better. YouTube was an incredible service that allowed anyone to instantly watch video through the process of streaming, which was a fairly new concept at the time. Basically, instead of the content you're watching being read off of a disc, it would be broadcasted to your device through the internet via whatever website you were using.
Did you know that's how YouTube works?
Yeah, it's something we don't think twice about nowadays, but I'll remind you, we're talking about a time period where computers look like this and fast and stable internet speeds look like this. Streaming video wasn't nearly as common then as it is now. And while many tried to make this work in decades beforehand, it wasn't until YouTube popped up that people realized just how ideal it was. But see, we're talking mid-2000s YouTube right now. This was mainly just used to watch cats doing funny shit and low-quality rips of music videos. If you wanted to watch Madagascar, you had to go to the theater or get your hands on the DVD. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. However, in 2007, the aforementioned company of Netflix began offering a service that allowed for the instant on-demand streaming of movies directly to your home. And you know what that meant. As the next few years passed, Netflix's self-titled streaming service got bigger and bigger. At first, it was just offered to those that were already paying for their monthly charge subscription service, but it eventually became a service on its own, allowing users to stream as many movies as they wanted for just a small fee per month. And this model just became more lucrative with time. Netflix began offering a larger variety of movies and acquired the rights to beloved shows such as Breaking Bad, Friends, and The Office, and all of this led to the amount of Netflix subscribers growing faster than ever. This was now the premier way to watch movies at home. You didn't even have to rent the DVDs anymore. You could just sit your ass down on the couch, hit a few buttons on your remote, pop open a bag of Cheetos, and let your internet do the rest. And other companies took notice, and they wanted a piece of that pie just as much as the next guy.
Oh, what the f?
Movie streaming, music streaming, video game streaming. As the human race entered the 2010s, this was not just becoming more popular, this was becoming the standard for many folks out there. Streaming services went from a really cool novelty to the reason I can't pay off my mortgage. And due to this rise in popularity of streaming, the amount of people buying brand new physical DVDs, CDs, and video games went down, and only continued to go down. It just didn't make as much sense anymore. Why would I waste time and money and space buying a physical copy of a movie that I'll probably just watch once and forget about after a week when I can just watch it on a subscription service alongside hundreds of other movies for a cheaper price? And this caused many out there to rethink their motives buying physical media in general. It wasn't necessary. Internet speeds were faster than ever. If you wanted to buy a movie, just buy it digitally. It won't take up any space. You don't even have to think about it. Same with music and video games. I don't need circles anymore.